It says the House voted 414 to 2 last week to maintain U.S. sanctions on Syria despite the earthquake that have killed thousands of Syrians in the last few weeks. AOC and the squad voted for the measure. The only opposition came from 2 Republicans, including Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. So, I was like, hold up. Let's take a look at this. And so, I took a look. And what is going on? Let me get this. Here we go. So let me share my screen. I had to get in off my list. On my list. All right. Okay, so this is Out of the Gray Zone. Also a really great journalist organization to follow. Anti-imperialist journalism. Says House overwhelmingly approves resolution to maintain serious sanctions after earthquake. Says every member of the Progressive Squad voted for the resolution. Only Republican representatives Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene voted against it. Let's get into it. So it says the House this week voted overwhelmingly in favor of a resolution to maintain sanctions on Syria following a devastating earthquake that has killed at least 5,900 people in the country. The resolution was introduced by Representative Joe Wilson and received 51 co-sponsors. It passed in a vote of 414 to 2. Only Representatives Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene voted against the measure. The resolution calls for Biden administration to remain committed to implementing the Caesar Syria Civilian Protection Act of 2019, a law that imposed crippling sanctions on Syria that are designed to prevent the country from rebuilding after years of war. The resolution said that the government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was falsely claiming the U.S. sanctions impede the aid response to the earthquake. But it is a fact that U.S. sanctions hurt the relief effort, something that has been detailed by the head of the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and UN experts. After initially claiming the sanctions wouldn't hurt the relief effort, the Biden administration issued a 180-day sanctions exemption for transactions related to earthquake relief. UN experts responded by welcoming the move, but said it wasn't enough and called for the sanctions to be fully lifted. So they said, so Biden administration was like, oh no, our sanctions, they're not gonna be a bad thing. The sanctions, they don't have a bearing. But then they were like, oh snap, it does have a bearing. Okay, lift the sanctions for 6 months. Lift them. All right. Okay, all right. If it didn't, they would have kept it in place. But obviously it does, and so they lifted the sanctions for 6 months, right? But who kept it in place? It was the House, right? If they weren't damaging, then they shouldn't have been lifted, but they are. Continues, the House resolution said it mourned the victims of the earthquake and portrayed enforcing the Caesar Act as a way to protect the Syrian people. Bullshit. But even before the earthquake, U.S. sanctions on Syria were having a devastating impact on the civilian population. Secretary of State Antony Blinken acknowledged in 2021 that it was U.S. policy to oppose the reconstruction of Syria, and the policy hasn't changed. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene ain't no saint, because Business Insider covered that Greene and Massey voted against the resolution, but completely mischaracterized the bill. The report said that they voted against mourning the 50,000 killed in the deadly earthquake in Turkey and Syria, and made no mention of the fact that it supported maintaining crushing sanctions on Syria. So they didn't really do it because they were just pure of heart. And all these sanctions are hurting the people of Syria. They just didn't want to mourn 50,000 people killed. So this also is a great article to go into. So that's from the Gray Zone. And you guys can also share that article. But here's the thing a lot of people don't realize. Sanctions is warfare. It is economic warfare. And the sanctions don't necessarily hurt the people who are at the top. It hurts the workers. What about Syrian workers? What about Syrian children? What about the Syrian poor? What about them? Do they not matter? And so that's what it's about. People will say, oh, well, we have to go against Bashar al-Assad. But you're really hurting the Syrian people. That's ultimately what you're doing. You don't really care about them. You don't care about the people. That's what it's about. Now, here's another article, and I'm going to be sharing this as well. Let's share the screen. Let me see. So this is from antiwar.com. It says Syrian Arab Red Crescent calls for lifting of sanctions on Syria after earthquake. It says U.S. has shown no interest in lifting sanctions, which are specifically designed to prevent Syria's reconstruction. It says the head of the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, SARC, on Tuesday called for the lifting of U.S. and other Western economic sanctions on Syria following a massive earthquake that's killed over 15,000 people in Syria and Turkey. The evacuation process and rescue operations are restricted due to obstacles resulting from the severe sanctions. Sanctions are preventing Syria from acquiring machinery needed to rescue people from the rubble. He says, I mean specifically machinery that lifts the rubble without injuring people trapped under the rubble. The economic sanctions imposed in our country is the main obstacle to getting this machinery. With this, we demand lifting for economic sanctions and the siege in order to allow aid deliveries and humanitarian actions to be implemented by SARC and other bodies. Hubabati, sorry, I'm horrible at pronouncing names. Hubabati appealed specifically to the European Union to lift sanctions and asked the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, for humanitarian assistance. These actions are against who? Against the Syrian people, he said. Yes, actually, that's exactly what they are against. They are actions against the Syrian people. It's your fault that you live under that government, and it's your fault that the earthquake happened. So you're just going to have to suffer. That's basically what it is. And people talk about, what about the children? What about the children? What about them? What about the Syrian children? Oh, but they don't care about that, right? It says the SARC operates in government-controlled territories, but Hubabati said that they are willing to cross into areas of Idlib that are mainly controlled by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an al-Qaeda-linked group. If parties agree to open a crossing, we are ready to send a convoy through the cross lines into Idlib. Says, in the wake of the earthquake, there are growing calls for sanctions on Syria to be lifted. We urge the immediate lifting of sanctions on Syria and allowing access to all materials so sanctions may not turn into a crime against humanity. It says the Middle East Council of Churches, representing Catholic, Orthodox, and Coptic Christians in the region. Despite the calls, the U.S. has shown no interest in easing sanctions. In comments to anti-war, a State Department spokesperson claimed that our sanctioning programs do not target humanitarian assistance. Rather, as a general matter, our general license permit activities in support of a humanitarian assistance, including in regime-held areas. New York Times said it is not able to receive direct aid from many countries because of sanctions. Only NGOs, non-governmental organizations, are able to transport aid into the country, but the sole border crossing approved by the UN for aid deliveries is closed because of damage caused by the earthquake. So one of the problems, and I saw this in the New York Times article, is that they're saying, well, if they get the money, if we lift the sanctions, then they're going to have access to the tents and all these supplies. And it's like, okay. They need them for the people. Why are we upset about that? Why are we upset of them getting these supplies and distributing them to their people? Right? Or they're saying, well, if we lift the sanctions, they're not only going to save the people, but they're also going to repair the infrastructure that was also destroyed during their war. So what? So what if they rebuild some of their infrastructure that was done during the war? Who cares? How can you tell if there was a building that was destroyed during the war or destroyed during the earthquake? Which one can you tell? I don't care which one. Restore the infrastructure. People's lives depend on it. Who cares? It's about the people. That's what it's about. Like, geez, Louise, these people are heartless. If this were the country that starts with a U that rhymes with propane, then guess what? They'd be all for it. Oh yeah. Let's rebuild. They gotta rebuild. And yet they don't care about it happening in Syria. Oh, that's right. They're not blonde hair and blue-eyed, and they have a little bit more melanin in their skin. And they're also trying to extract resources like oil out of the region, which means regime change. That's what it ultimately means. Now, I want to play this, but I can't play the entire thing. But I'm going to play close to the end so that you guys can hear this, because they're talking about the proxy war in that European country that I can't really talk about on YouTube anymore, because if I do, then I'll get demonetized. It's true. But I'm going to play close to the end because they're talking about a little bit of what we're talking about. So. But this is a great video to share.
That's the question.
I'm just grabbing the credit.
All right. So this question says, I work for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Myself and many of my colleagues work tirelessly.
I just wanted to leave. I need to know, will you support Representative Gates' resolution to pull troops out of Syria? These wars are going to get us killed. We are forcing the Syrians into massive starvation. This is not something to ignore. The bill is going to be voted on Wednesday. Why are people ignoring this? People are dying in your name. You are my representative, Representative Tlaib. I demand an answer to this resolution. I'm going to call your office. I'm going to be at your office. We need to pull our troops out of Syria. We need to stop the sanctions on these wars. Oh my God.
Keep going.
This is fucking crazy.
Yep. It is crazy. And people like Rashida Tlaib will not even listen. It's as if she's bought and paid for. It's like that, right? And people talk about the Democratic Party and how, oh, they're actually fighting for human rights. Tlaib had an opportunity to talk about lifting the sanctions on Syria so that people won't starve to death, so that they can actually get the building and the materials in order to get people out of the rubble so that they can save lives. And they're like, no, let's keep the sanctions. She was also confronted earlier in that video about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, by the way. That's why I shared it, because I can't really play it like that myself. I have to be very careful. But that's the point. We're constantly perpetuating either economic warfare, cold warfare, or hot warfare all the time, in order to go into countries and to regime change, extract their resources, and make it cheap for the corporate dictators. The United States government doesn't just do this just because out of willy-nilly. They're doing it on behalf of the corporate dictatorship that owns them. Because the corporate dictatorship actually wants all the resources that Syria may have. They want all the resources that Sudan may have. They want all the resources that Chad may have. They want all the resources that Brazil may have. They want all the resources, that Democratic Republic of Congo has. They want the resources that China has. This is the problem. They want these resources. They want it for cheap, and then they also want it all. And so because of that, this is why our foreign policy is the way it is. It's all about money. It's all about resources. It's all about control. It's what we on the left like to call imperialism, meaning that the corporate empire that is the United States of America, or the United Corporations of America, as some like to eloquently state, is that it is a means in order to control the resources of the world so that you have rulers at the top, right? And everybody else serving those rulers at the bottom. They want you to continue being servants. But it's just like being on the pyramid, right? If you're at the bottom of the pyramid, right, and you're on your hands and knees and you're like, your arms are shaking, and you're sweating and you're breathing hard because you got all that weight on top of you. And then you feel like you're going to buckle under the pressure from all this weight. And you're looking at your people to the left and on the right, and they're also shaking and struggling. What do you do? What do you do? You want the people on top to fall? You stand up. Stand up. Now, they're making it hard so that you don't. This is why we're organizing, right? This is why Workers Strike Back and other organizations like this are so important. These are why housing organizations, I know Nick is a part of KC Tenants. These are why KC Tenants is so important. This is why Strive Pensacola, which they're helping housing for people who are trans, especially, and queer people. This is why they're so important. This is why we have mutual aid organizations and local municipalities are so important. Food Not Bombs is so important. This is why these organizations are very important. This is why I recommend that you join an organization in order so that we can come together, build solidarity so we can stand up. Because the Democrats aren't going to do it. And they will talk about, oh, well, we're fighting for trans rights and we're fighting for gun rights. Not gun rights. Gun reform. But you're not actually fighting for our rights. By the way, I believe in the Second Amendment. Trust and believe that. But they're not fighting for our rights. The Republicans are not fighting for Second Amendment rights. They don't. No, because if that was the case, they wouldn't be allowing the police to actually gun us black people down in the streets like they would. If they actually believe in Second Amendment rights, they would believe in Second Amendment rights for all, but they don't. They don't believe in our rights to housing. They don't believe in our rights to health care. You fight for what you believe in. If you're not willing to fight, then you don't actually believe in it. I don't care if you come out with bruised, bloody, battered, at least you put up a fight. That's not what they're doing. That's not with Pocan. That's not with Kana. That's not with Omar, Talib, Ocasio-Cortez, Jayapal, Warner. That's not what Sanders is doing. That's not what Warren is doing. Bowman. They're not. They're not. They will say that they are. But actions speak louder than words. That's what it's about. And so, in order to make things change, especially on the anti-war front, and by anti-war, meaning anti-imperialist, and also meaning wanting to end these sanctions, which is also warfare, let's get together with these organizations. All it takes is for you to sign up. Go to the meetings, see what work they're doing. It may just be on a municipal level, but at least you're doing something that helps directly affect the people's lives in a positive way.